the unofficial capital of the Western Reserve. It's named Cleveland after a Revolutionary War general named General Moses Cleveland. And this center of the Western Reserve become the center of industry, of transportation, of education, of civilization on the American frontier. The African American community of Cleveland gets very quickly established there too. Because this area gets nicknamed the New England of the West, that meant that there was a high abolitionist sentiment there. That made it a safer place for free black families. So again, they're coming for education opportunities. They're coming for all those employment opportunities. Again, this was a huge huge area of industry. The transportation alone and the opportunities there, lots of different diverse opportunities in Cleveland. So some of the individuals in this area that kind of have an influence, well, Sojourner Truth never lived in Cleveland, never lived in Akron, but this area starts becoming so heavily populated, and again, this center of abolition and a more progressive mindset, that they start holding conventions. Well, it's not just conventions about abolition, but also women's rights too. So Sojourner Truth, she comes and she goes to Akron for the 1851 Women's Rights Convention. And that's where she gives her famous speech, Ain't I a Woman? Or a variation of it. Unfortunately, that speech was never recorded in all its actual monologue that she gave. But some of the early black settlers of Cleveland helped shape the community as well. So Cleveland, unlike a lot of major cities at this time, it is more integrated. So we talked about the black communities of Cincinnati, very highly concentrated along the riverfront. You see much more integration in early Cleveland. And some of those early settlers includes a man named John Malvin. So John Malvin was an influential civic leader in Cleveland. He lived there from the 1830s to the 1880s. He was actually born in 1795, enslaved in a place called Dumfries, Virginia. And he was born to a free woman and an enslaved father, which is kind of unusual. It's really quite unusual, actually. And in 1827, he moved to Cincinnati. He lived there for a few years. He was assisting on the Underground Railroad. He also gets married, and then he moves to Kentucky with his new bride. His bride grew up in Kentucky, and when they're living there, though, even though they are free, they're part of the 5% of 5% of African Americans living in Kentucky were free, had free status. So they're one of that very small minority in Kentucky. And so that puts the family in danger quite often. In fact, at one point he's accused of being a runaway. And so he's able to demonstrate his freedom, that his free status, but he says we can't stay here. And so they end up coming to Cleveland. And from there, he is still assisting in the Underground Railroad. He purchased his father-in-law's freedom and brought him up here too. He is starting schools. He's funding schools up here. He is a shipbuilder. He's an entrepreneur. He's a philanthropist. He's fighting things like the Ohio Black Codes. He's going to the black conventions and he's speaking out against slavery. He's speaking out against the fugitive slave law as it's being passed. And so John Malvin, again, is just a great leader of Cleveland. If for any of you who want to come to the cemetery tonight, we're going to visit John Malvin's grave site. I'll tell you a little bit more there. But basically, John Malvin, even though he was such this influential person and left such a great impact on the broader Cleveland community, he wasn't buried with a marker. And so it doesn't happen until the 1990s. And you you see that with a lot of these historical figures that we are encountering on this journey that we're celebrating. They haven't been celebrated for very long. They haven't been recognized in so long. So John Malvin is just one of those figures. Now, that is Erie Street Cemetery that we're going to go to tonight. There is a larger cemetery. I'm going to save a lot of those stories for those of you who want to come tonight. But there's a larger cemetery in Cleveland called the Woodland Cemetery. It superseded the Erie Street Cemetery, and it basically is 10 times the size of Erie Street. There are a lot of notable African American leaders and soldiers buried in Woodland Cemetery, including the family of a woman named Lucy Stanton Day Sessions. I'm just curious, has anybody heard of Lucy Stanton Day? Has anybody heard of a man named Howard Day? Okay, William Howard Day. So basically, Lucy is the first African American woman to complete a college course, a 4-year college course in the United States. She does so in 1850 from Oberlin College. And she grew up in Cleveland. Her father was a barber, and he died when she was quite young. But after graduation, she marries William Howard Day. He was also a graduate of Oberlin College. He has this abolitionist newspaper in Cleveland, and they have a daughter together, and they're kind of this power couple. In fact, he's publishing a lot of her works. She's a wonderful writer. She actually wrote a graduation speech for Oberlin College, but being a woman, she wasn't allowed to deliver or read that college address. It was called A Plea for the Oppressed, and it's really interesting because there's a lot of parallels between her speech in 1850 as well as Sojourner Truth's speech in 1851. So a lot of ideas, I'm very curious if they have been corresponding with one another, actually, because it's very similar speech there. But anyways, there's a power couple, but her husband leaves her. He abandons her and his child, and he has a separate career. And so Lucy really struggles for a long time because she is African American. She's a woman, so she's got to overcome perception of both her race and her gender. Plus, she's a single mother at this time, a divorcee. And so life is very hard for Lucy. But she lands on her feet. She starts teaching at various schools in the South. She remarries a man named Levi Sessions, and within a few years they moved to California. They moved to LA, and she's actually buried in LA in the Rosedale Angeles Cemetery in LA. And her stepfather was a man named John Brown, not the John Brown of Harper's Ferry fame, but a prominent African-American business owner of Cleveland. He was also a barber, like her father, but what this John Brown does is he's working at all the big spots in Cleveland. He's working at the major hotels, he's making money, all the money that he's earning, he's investing into property. He's exponentially increasing his wealth, his fortune. And when he dies, he's one of the wealthiest African Americans in Ohio. But he is funding his own schools too. So Lucy, before she gets the opportunity to go to Oberlin, she goes through one of his schools. So he is providing these educational opportunities that so many families are looking for their children. Why so many people are moving up here to Ohio in the first place, to provide better lives for their families. And so that's John Brown's story. And then I also like to ask, has anybody heard of Sarah Lucy Bagby, or she mostly went by just Lucy before? Okay, so her story is key. Sarah Lucy Bagby was enslaved in Virginia, and she had been, she was a child when she was sold away from her mother, and she was sold to a family called the Goshorns. And eventually, as an adult, she is enslaved by the second generation of Goshorns, and she is determined to get her freedom. And what she plans to do is that the family, particularly the daughter that she was entrusted to take care of, was traveling, and so she went with her. It brought them close to the Pennsylvania border. And so she had actually been able to connect with a free man in Pennsylvania who then helped her out. She got away. She came up to Cleveland, and she started working as a domestic servant, a paid domestic servant in a few various households in Cleveland. She escapes in October of 1860. She's discovered in Cleveland in January of 1861. So she's not free long.